Welcome to the Canby Planning Commission, meeting today for Monday, October 14th, 2013. First, we will call to order. We have Commissioners John Proctor, John Savory, Charles Cocker, Sean Hensley, and new Planning Commissioner John Surlett tonight. Sean Joyce is not here, our Vice Chair. First item of business for tonight will be public input. I see we do have a bit of an audience today. Is there anyone that would like to come to the open microphone time on any items of interest generically? No one is rising, so we'll move next to our, I guess, new business. The welcome is in new business. Okay, let's then move to public hearings. We have none tonight, so that's why our astute staff put the welcome of the new planning commissioner in new business. First item of new business, Mr. Surlett. Thank you for joining us in the planning commission. Would you like to make any comments to, as you may or may not know, we are on TV. Yes. So you can speak to anyone that may be watching, the rest of us, any welcoming comments? Or?
Not really. I just got a lot to learn, so go from there, one step at a time.
Well, thank you for volunteering. Welcome. It's certainly a time commitment, and it's certainly a public service. So on behalf of anybody that I can speak for, thank you for serving.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have an approval of minutes. We have the minutes from our August 26, 2014 meeting. Is there any discussion about the minutes from the August 26, 2013?
I would move to approve the minutes from August 26th.
Okay, there's been a motion to approve the August 26 minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, there's been a second. Is there any discussion about these? Not seeing any discussion, we'll move to a vote. All in favor of approving the August 26, 2013 minutes, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, signify by saying nay. The ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Next item of business, a staff report.
So I'm going to ask if you want to go back up to the main item on the agenda. That's okay.
Oh,
we got it out of the
business
way. But 4B is the main item on our agenda
Okay.
tonight.
I apologize, yes, for skipping over that. Let's go to that item. I was thinking that's presented by you guys anyways, correct?
We just shrunk it down too small, so you skipped right over it.
Okay, we're back to new business, item number B, which is review and discussion of draft street vendor ordinance, i.e. food trucks and carts. So, well, I'll pass it to staff first.
Okay. We had an item on your agenda in the past to introduce this topic, and it was brought forward primarily because we had what at the time we were calling a potential vendor operator that was here and explained that he's actually trying to put into place what he calls a production unit, which is basically a commercial kitchen on wheels that produces salsa. And so I don't know if that rings a bell with any of you. And that got us thinking about the possibility of other food carts, food trucks, possible retail businesses that might want to operate in some sort of manner other than the typical conventional one where a business operation builds a brick and mortar building, gets a building permit, and operates his building, his business. There's a whole nother world out there now of mobile operators that set up either semi-permanently or potentially permanently, most of the time on private property, but potentially also on public property and potentially on street right-of-ways and maybe even sidewalks that want to place a business operation in all sorts of forms and shapes and sizes of structures or carts or push carts or trucks or tents or canopies, whatever you can possibly think of to operate their business in. And that's what you kind of have before you. At your direction, you said you're interested in seeing what such an ordinance might look like and to discuss that further. And so no decisions were made previously other than let's explore this topic. So staff made a quick stab, took a couple days to create a quick rough draft of a possible, what we're calling a street vendor ordinance. And one of the things that makes this different, you might not all be familiar with the fact that about four years ago we visited this topic and for the first time created what we have a chapter in the Land Development Code now called Temporary Vendor Ordinance. And that ordinance provides an opportunity for a wide variety of vendors, just as we just discussed, to set up only on private property for a 90-day period. And it was addressing primarily the fact that existing vendors were getting approval from the property owners along Highway 99E, primarily in the major shopping areas, to set up near the street and sell their wares. And they would do that somewhere shy of, well, before we passed the ordinance, nobody had any real knowledge of how long they were there, and there were no standards on how they would set up. Since we passed that ordinance, they established a 90-day limit. It also had a renewal provision that you could renew it for one additional 90-day period if there were no issues during that first 90 days that caused concerns or problems from the police department or someone else that might be concerned with it. There's been very few of those temporary vendor permits issued. In fact, since that ordinance was passed, the businesses that were of concern along the highway have not come back, and what we've been issuing is firework display permits that are on private property for a couple weeks before the 4th of July. They get their permit, and the ones that have been going through that process, I think there's 3 of them, have been pretty much in the same place selling fireworks for a long time. And so they pretty much, it's an automatic renewal each year now. We've been doing it long enough. They turn in the exact same site plan year after year to get approval. And that works fine because it's temporary. Well, the salsa business that came in front of us indicated that he needed a permanent type location. And so what they're doing, and what the food cart craze across the nation is doing, is they're trying to be entrepreneurial and start up a new business without the cost that's involved in either leasing or building a building. And it's a thriving type I guess, business operation in many communities now, and Several articles and research papers that we've looked at have indicated that the city of Portland is probably one, if not the top food cart city in the nation. And so they have figured out a way to allow, generally what you see is pods of vendors set up in certain locations and grouped, a whole bunch of them grouped together. And they're almost all in structures that are on wheels. And so you could call them, in a sense, kind of mobile, yet they never move. They're where they're at permanently, and they didn't get a building permit. That doesn't mean they don't necessarily meet some fire and life safety requirements that might otherwise be required by the fire department or the building code. But I don't know what the process is, but they've gone through a circumvention of the normal building permit process. They obviously do not have building permits. And so that's the kind of thing that we're trying to look at here and address. And so we've got this draft ordinance that we can kind of glance through. And the very last page of this draft is just kind of a series of questions. And these questions actually came from the city of Gresham, why they were drafting their, I guess, I'm trying to remember what they called their ordinance, but it was something like street food vendor ordinance, something like that. They didn't use, I don't think they used the terminology vendors. That's what we're proposing to use.
Let me ask you one question on this. Did this come, is this a sort of a first draft that you guys cobbled together from other places? Or is this something that has been refined or in use by any surrounding or municipality somewhere? That
There are some provisions that are cobbled that are in use from some other jurisdictions, but as a whole, no, this is a very rough draft of a place to start discussion on this particular topic. And these questions, I think, are primarily where we want to focus in trying to drive where we might want to take this. And from a very philosophical standpoint, we need to, now that you've seen, some of the things that need to be discussed and addressed, just a reiteration, if you think this is the right thing for the city of Canby to be doing or not. And if so, I think the really large questions are, do we limit it to private property or not? And if we include city property, what are some of the issues that are related to that might be of concern? And then another really large issue that we want to make sure you're all aware of is that any ordinance that we do related to this will be extremely controversial with the existing businesses within town. It has been experienced by every other ordinance that's passed in any other city across the nation, and that's the number one thing they say that caused problems is the existing businesses who feel like they're at a disadvantage when we allow this kind of use that doesn't have to go through the same expenses and such that they had to either build a building or lease a space, and could potentially operate outside of their door, potentially with a similar product competing with them. And so some of the research that we've looked at indicated that the minute you start putting restrictions, if you're going to decide that this is something you want to do, the minute you start putting restrictions on them, you're tightening the noose, and the more nooses there are, the less likely you'll ever get one, and that they'll be here and they'll be successful. And so that starts anywhere from what are you going to charge for a permit, And generally, our research indicated that if you charge much more than $250, you're probably not going to get any because they won't be able to afford it. The only thing they're spending their money on is their cart, truck, tent, structure that protects them from the rain, whatever it is, and their merchandise that they want to sell. And anything beyond that, such as the permit charge or a liability insurance requirement that might be onerous and difficult and expensive, to restrictions on what their facility must look like or how it must be painted, and all of those kind of things could be problematic for some of them in terms of the cost to fix up their facility to meet your design standards. And so that's the number one weakness in this draft ordinance, is that we have very few, if any, design standards. And there was, I guess, generally a feeling that if you're going to allow these, then we need to have appropriate standards so that their appearance is either halfway decent or what we think we want them to be, because they could pop up anywhere where a private property owner would give them a right to sit on their property. And we won't have much to say about that. We do say in the ordinance that we want to know that you have a contract agreement and that you're not just squatting without permission on somebody's property. And one of the interesting things is reading about some of the restrictions other cities have put on. The majority of the cities, well, I don't know if it's the majority, but the biggest restriction is to prohibit it on public property. And the main reason seems to be a legal concern, in that if you do so, you're giving the use of public property for a business to earn a profit without potential compensation to the property owner, which is the city. And so maybe you can remedy that by the city charging them if they're going to be on private property. I don't know. It's a legal matter. But that's one reason that a lot of cities have not wanted to get into that, because public property is entrusted for the care of the general public as a whole, and to allow a single business to earn profit off of that public property could be a problem or an issue. So I wanted to share that with you up front. That has not stopped many cities in the U.S. from allowing these things on public property. The ones that do very successfully have associated those with events. And so if it's like the Canby Event Center Fair, or our annual cruise-in, or some other event that the city basically sponsors and is a regular annual event, shouldn't be a problem. It's very common. Cities all over the U.S. are doing that kind of thing. And I don't think they're worrying about that legal question. Are they profiting off of utilizing city property? Because you've got that direct tie to, it's the community good that we want them to be there, as many as we can. But without those special sponsored events, I guess that question raises itself a little bit more.
But aren't those allowed under the 90-day permitting
On the
process?
90-day, it's only for private property.
Okay.
The ordinance was specifically only private property.
Would this include Christmas tree lots?
We have one or more Christmas tree lots that have operated in the past here in Canby that have been located on public property. And what they've done is basically asked the property owner for permission which is basically the city manager, is representing the city, and they've gone through a permit process that the city administration has handled and have allowed them.
So would we fold that under this umbrella of these regulations, or would it be?
We could,
se-
yes. We could very well do that under these regulations if we choose to do that.
Wouldn't it clean up the process if we did?
Yeah, potentially.
So what I want to do as we move forward with more discussion, I'll let Brian have any more just sort of introductory comments. Now, we'll discuss it a bit, ideas, bounce things off, brainstorm a little bit. I do want to open it up in case any of the public wants to comment, and we'll have a short session for that, let them have their input like we would on a normal public hearing. Just we'll give them 3 minutes to sort of say their piece, and then we'll continue discussion after that and direct staff to do anything that we should so decide after that point in time. Is that okay?
Right. So I try not to go on too lengthy here. The very first paragraph in this proposed kind of defines, and this is taken directly from the temporary vendor permit ordinance that we have, except I took out the 90-day requirement, and we also added in there, if you read in the first sentence, including a mobile production kitchen, which was specifically to address the salsa production unit that came before us, that kind of prompted us to think about, can we do something for more than 90 days? And we did it this way because we're having difficulty including them in what we think of traditionally and across the nation as a street vendor. And the reason is, by his own definition, he doesn't really serve customers. Their intent is to get their product into brick and mortar buildings for sale. And they're not really serving customers at their mobile vendor or production unit kitchen. They're just creating the product. And so if they were wildly successful in getting their product into stores and had orders, they would build a brick and mortar building in the industrial park and they'd produce their salsa. And so we're not sure if they fit this ordinance or not, but we made an attempt to fit them into this. And in the meantime, we've actually advised them that we believe they can set up and operate as a home-based business in the driveway out of their home in town. They're a little bit concerned in doing that because our home-based business ordinance is basically enforced through complaints by neighbors. And so if you were to receive a complaint, then staff has to go out and observe very closely and carefully if they're meeting the home-based business standards. And they would be operating with a Traeger smoker that would emit an odor, a very nice odor, albeit, that also neighbors do quite frequently throughout the week and on weekends in the same neighborhood, but on a business basis, operating potentially more often, it's possible that having a Traeger cooker going on a regular basis might be questionable in a business operation in a neighborhood, because one of the premises of our home-based business ordinance is that you can't readily identify when you drive by that a business operation is going on. And if you can, it's within the guidelines of the number of trips that can be made, or that it's not environmentally objectionable to what you would normally experience in a residential neighborhood. And so we're thinking that operating a Traeger stove in association with his business is probably not out of the norm of a smell that somebody would experience in a normal residential neighborhood, and that he could do that successfully. So I was going to share that with you too. Of course, his fear is to get started and have orders and then have the potential of being forced to shut down for non-compliance. And so that's why he's trying to arrange a leased space on a commercial property in town where that he'd be able to permanently operate his business until it's wildly successful enough to build a brick and mortar building for it. And so I want you to know where this started and came from, and we may have actually found a solution for him just operating in his own home-based business.
And Brian, let me ask you a question on this. Well, let me recap a little bit of summary here from what I understand. We've got our current temporary permit, which a person could utilize for up to 180 days out of the year. So somebody could currently do that basically all summer or something like that, or most of the summer, and temporarily be at a site doing some of this kind of thing with some limitations in a site plan and some other things here, sign code and other restrictions on it. This change, to some degree, what we've got at least, the current draft, would make that such that it could be sort of almost permanent in nature or year-round, but the structure itself would not be necessarily a permanent building, a permanent structure. Is that somewhat the preface of my...
Summarizes it.
So then
very
what,
well.
would there be anything to prevent right now under sort of the, if this was to be adopted under these two, that would prevent or address something like a single wide being pulled on, a full-on single wide trailer that's on axles being pulled into an empty industrial lot and utilized for something, just parked there and used for a law firm. I mean, and even though a law firm wouldn't normally be permitted on an industrial site.
I think they could do that today under the temporary vendor ordinance for up to 90 days if they went through that permit process.
But how
and met
about
the standards?
How about
And under this,
the indefinite?
they could potentially do that indefinitely if the lease owner of the private property agreed to it, and they met whatever standards that the lease owner wanted them to
Okay.
meet, and they complied with the fairly limited standards that we've included in here. And so, yeah, so you need to be thinking about all of these possibilities and which one of them need restrictions or not in terms of size or appearance, because the way we've left it right now, trying not to tighten the restrictions too much at this point, because we don't know for sure what kind of structures or facilities they might propose to do this, because we already discovered the only mobile production kitchen in the state of Oregon that's been permitted by the Department of Agriculture wants to set up business here in Canby. And so there's a wide variety of things that could happen in the format these could take. You know, anywhere from a hot dog cart that somebody pushes down a sidewalk to what you just described. And
There's just for the sake of pointing it out, there is a commercial operation that manufactures these kind of things in Aurora. Not manufactures, the wrong word. Builds them, customizes them, whatever you might want to say. Mobile food
Yep.
trucks and vehicles.
Yep, so one of the most common now across the nation that's really taking hold is food trucks. They're basically a commercial rolling kitchen. And they have a side window with a pop-up canopy, and they can park anywhere, at any point, at any time, and set up for business. And if it's good, they might want to stay for the whole year. If it's not, they might want to roll down to the next neighborhood or the next town and set up. And so that's where people are catching on to the benefits that are associated with these. And, you know, this is where maybe you'll want to take advantage of some of the people that we have here tonight in the audience, because there are definitely some reasons for us to be considering this type of thing and the vitality that it can lend to the community. And many of these have, business operators have been shown to start off, not have any capital, but have started a business and have graduated to be successful enough to build their own brick and mortar building.
Let's do this then. I've got some comments. I'll maybe open it up for some brainstorming and mention some things. Maybe some of you will like them, not like them. That'll start the conversation. Then we can discuss it. Anybody else that's got ideas, things they don't like, do like about this, and we'll kind of see how the clay gets molded here, and do that for a little bit until maybe we'll see what the clock says, and then we'll open it up for public commentary. My initial thoughts on this is that I like the concept, as I did before, of figuring out a way to do this. I think we definitely want to be encouraging entrepreneurship, industry, people getting jobs, having products that are at a good price, the highest quality product that the price was willing to bear, and doing that in Canby, getting people the products and services they want at the price they're willing to pay. And so I think we should figure out a way to facilitate this so that it can be done. There's obviously things that need to be thought through, and I think Brian and Angie have done a good job. My initial thoughts getting to this particular proposal that we've got in front of us is my initial take is that I don't think we should be, at least under this system, I think we should probably exclude the public rights-of-way from this code provision of this system. One, because it doesn't have any of the kinds of things I think you would need to set that up, which would be how are you going to deal with renewals? How are you going to avoid favoritism? If somebody's there, they're successful, is there a line for that street corner? If we allow it on public rights-of-way, sidewalks or whatever, then there become a priority list for that particular street corner, and how are you going to deal with that? And obviously you're blocking public rights-of-way, and I just think we should, under this, sort of this, I guess, starting framework that we've got, we wouldn't have nearly enough detail to cover what we'd want if we were going to deal in public rights-of-way. So I think we should probably look at considering it just for private property.
If Chair, if I could, since you're on that topic, some of the cities that have successfully done it on the public right-of-ways have included restrictions that you can't set up within 30 feet of a street intersection. You can only set up in a parallel parking space, not an angled one, because if you can imagine, if you're in an angled parking space, people are mulling around your cart out in the street. And so you'd have to have a window that pops up curbside. You have to be clear of any vision clearance area. You can't park in front of a commercial driveway and those kind of things. And you need to be in a zone district that allows the use outright, which would mean a commercial zoning district. And so those would be the typical restrictions if it were allowed in the public right-of-way.
Okay, thank you, Brian. My other thoughts were, like number C6, that the street vendor be located on a paved or hard surface. I don't honestly think there's any reason that it needs to be a paved or hard surface. We've got places in town that I guess something could be located that might be gravel or dirt, and I'm not sure why. We're always, in other parts of the code, we're always trying to push people against paving everything and having, all that. Why would we need it to be paved or hard surface? I just at least would have that question of concern. Why would we be limiting it only to paved and hard surfaces?
Truck. You want it to get stuck somewhere in the field somewhere.
Yeah,
I mean, then the owner has to get rid of it, but they could tear up the field.
But what if it's just a push, what if it's a push cart? What if
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a ice chest? They're selling
Right.
water along or ices along the street on a hot summer day. I don't know.
Maybe
I
grandma
think we were
flips. I don't
intending
know.
for that to not have trucks tear up nice landscaped areas, so that's what we were aiming at. But if
Yeah.
it's just grass, I agree.
The other one, I was
I
thinking
think it's
C.
logical they're going to park where they can and not
Where they're
tear down
approved
some
to.
trees to do it or something. But
Yeah.
I think that's what we were aiming at.
On C8, there's another one that the driveways there, prohibiting them from encroaching into driveways. I dealt with one in West Lynn, and I had a client a few years back, this is just an example of things to think about, who was a cupcake, by the way, fantastic cupcakes. I don't think she's actually making them anymore, but it was sort of along the lines of a coffee, the mobile coffee carts, but it was cupcakes. And they were going to park in a place kind of like we have in the abandoned gas station, the old gas station. There was gas station lanes, perfect place for people to pull through and drive through. Well, to me, that would be a driveway. If you were going to allow that kind of a thing, it's the perfect location for it, but that kind of language, barring somebody from using it in a driveway, would be problematic. And so I think we could keep that kind of a concept. The other one on D1B here, I thought if we're going to have some sort of a cap on a percentage of, sort of deteriorating products, we would want to figure out whether that's combined or some language that, is it 10% of all of the surface area combined, or is it 10% can't be rusty, and 10% can't be peeling, and 10%, can't be deteriorating. So we might want to think about some language on that, as a comment that I thought of. And then the last one that I was going to comment, start the conversation here, is if we were to do it only on private property, I don't think that we want to have a 50 feet, this is E2 that I'm looking at, have a 50 feet ban. I mean, for instance, what if Parsons wants to have a couple of clothes racks selling some athletic apparel? Well, they're outside on the street, maybe in their property, and yet they've got Canby Spirit right across the way. It's probably within 50 feet. So are they going to be banned from, selling semi-athletic apparel because they're within 50 feet of a sporting goods store or a sporting clothing store? That kind of thing. If it's their private property, I don't think that through this we ought to be picking or telling them you can't sell this particular thing if it's on private property. Maybe it'd be different if we did public property, would be my thoughts. So I don't know, anybody's got some thoughts on any of those or other things that jumped out at you?
I do.
John, go ahead.
Okay. I work in Portland all the time. I drive by food carts many times every single day. And I can't imagine that kind of chaos and unsightliness in Canby. I also don't see, no matter what kind of codes we write in here, I don't see how there would be much in the way of enforcement. I'd like to find a way to separate out the non-commercial business that this gentleman wants to do with his mobile food production business from a retail food cart situation. I think that as a matter of fairness, people like the Backstop Restaurant, the Wild Hare, all of these other established businesses that have poured tens of thousands of dollars, played by the rules, and for us to write a different ordinance so that their competitors can come in for a lesser cost and present an uneven playing field. offends my sense of fairness and, in all ways, shapes, and forms. So I think there's an issue of unsightliness. I don't think that if you get a bunch of pods my experience is, it's anecdotal, I have to admit, because I only see it every single day, that food carts they're unsightly. I can't imagine them as being a real attractive thing for most of the city of Canby. That's just one man's opinion. So those are it for me.
Could I throw in real quick one other request that just walked in the door 2 weeks ago, so you can visualize one more that actually wants to set up, is at the northeast 3rd and Juniper, so just one block off of Ivy. I think it's the New Life Church. They have the church building, and then to the east or towards the fairgrounds, there's a big parking lot, and they want to set up a semi-permanent building that wouldn't meet building permit requirements to sell coffee out of their parking lot. And so that would be someone that can't meet our temporary vendor ordinance, and be on private property in their parking lot. But since they want to do it for more than 90 days, they're asking me, well, how can I do this? And so I told them, well, this would be the only way, is if something like this ordinance got adopted. Just thought I'd share.
Would it only be on the days they have service, or is it all the 7 days a week? Or do
They
specify?
didn't really specify that at this point, and then I asked them whether it would be serving more than just their church patrons, and they said, well, potentially anybody that walked by as well.
I can help you with that, kind of, since that is my church. They just recently put, within the structure of their building, a coffee shop to serve people during the service and immediately thereafter. So I suspect that it would be for the purpose of serving, non-congregation members most of the time, because they can already do that. So,
John, let me ask you a question on one of your things that you brought up. See if I can play devil's advocate for discussion purposes here. To me, it seems that if it's on private property, you wouldn't be creating any unfair competition, because the landlord of the private property would be able to charge them whatever the market rate is for the quality of piece of property that they're getting. And so you wouldn't necessarily be, I'm with you, we wouldn't want the government setting up some sort of unfair process, unfair competition. But I look at that, I think of, okay, we've got, the coffee bean or whatever, in a fantastic human being in a fantastic fancy building, great location, and then you've got a much less sophisticated place on the north side of town.
bikini baristas, come on now, Tyler, let's call it what it is.
And they serve a different clientele. The bikini baristas is on gravel. It's not nearly, as fancy, and that kind of thing. They're not necessarily, they are competing with each other. They both sell coffee, but, it's, I think.
But I would assume, Tyler, that they both had to meet a certain minimum criteria for putting their business there. Whether it's because they're both permanent structures from what I observed. I mean, the human being is for sure. I've never visited the bikini barista, I have to admit. So I don't know whether it's something that is mobile. If you just picked up the skirt and hooked it up to trailer hitch and off you go. I don't know. But I'm going to make the assumption that they both had to meet a certain minimum criteria for establishing that type of business in either location. And so I would assume that they would have to have building permits. They would have had to have plumbing and electrical permits. They couldn't have, they had to have entrance and exits that were well marked out and things like that. To do that, you know, that would be my thinking on that. So,
Okay. Anybody else got sort of their bullet points or things that they want to mention about this concept or in
I
detail?
wouldn't mind going next. I agree with John. I agree with Mr. Savory. Let's not do John.
yes, it's just three of us.
That I don't like the idea of big pods of food carts. I've been downtown several times to the the little food cart villages that they've got down there, and it's just I don't see that any place here in Cayman. I don't see a spot for it. And quite honestly, I don't know that we have people beating our door down right now to be able to do that. When I originally looked at this, looking at what we were brought to begin with, and this mobile production versus what we were brought with this code, I wasn't seeing where this really wrapped around the issue that we really need to be looking at. I see a really hard road here of trying to use this code to help out the situation we're in. And we have a gentleman that wants to put a business on private property, but it's not any kind of public vendor. He's selling product. So I would tend to lean towards the property owner themselves, and that's something that they need to work out. As long as he can meet code in what he's setting up, I don't have a problem with him being there. If whoever he puts, if he's putting it on somebody's property, they're the one that has to answer whether or not they want it there and how they set that up, and then it all has to be to code. But I don't know that having this vendor ordinance is what is going to help him or what we really want.
So you're saying if the proposed street vendor use, if you will, complied with the underlying zone, you just say you'd want to maybe have a process where they can just do it if it fits under the underlying zone?
No, that's not all what I'm
No,
saying.
okay.
The street, I don't necessarily see a need for the street vendor thing in the first place. I mean, I don't know that we necessarily even want it here, if there's any kind of pull for it to be here. What I'm saying is that as for a mobile production, which I see as a totally different beast, we had this brought to us as a street vendor, and he's not a street vendor. I mean, he's not selling anything out of there. He's producing something in there. So I see it as quite different. And I'm happy to hear that we may have found a way for him to work around that in his own property, which is even better, because then he's paying himself to be there. And my tractor runs every day too, so don't worry about that part. But yeah, I hope that does work for him as his own business on his own property. But I still see that if he can work a deal with a property owner, I don't know that this is the code that we need to have him do that, if that makes any sense. I mean, it's a different thing than having a coffee cart or somebody that's going to sell tacos out of a truck or whatever. This is totally different, I think.
In general, staff agrees with you 100%, because the way we drafted this, which was a surprise to you that we're even doing this, because we had to specify him specifically to get him included in this, because he's so different
Right.
than anything else. We didn't feel like it fit well either. And one other idea we had, besides the home occupation for the mobile production kitchen, was maybe as an accessory use to where he wanted to lease on Cuthbert's property at the grocery. But the difficulty that I'm still seeing with that is we could get the use allowed as an accessory use, but his facility, we're still wrestling with, does it need a building permit if it's going to be there permanently? Well, no, because it's on wheels. So maybe we could allow somehow or other, just not worry about that. If there's a lease agreement, the use is an outright permitted use on the property. The fact that it's on wheels doesn't matter. And we don't have to worry about the county asking for them to do a building permit because it's on wheels, so they won't. And so maybe we can do it in that manner. I think Angie had thought of that as, I don't know if I explained it right or not.
Yeah, I was thinking it as an accessory use, for this, the salsa gentleman, he's proposing, I think when he first came to us, we were under the impression that he was going to sell salsa out of Cuts First parking lot. And then we proceeded to draft the food cart ordinance, and then we found out a couple weeks ago that he wanted to make salsa out of the back of Cuts First, where he wouldn't even be viewable from the public behind a fence. So I think it's still good to have this conversation because we do have inquiries, about, for example, the coffee shop. So, but I think we were a little unclear about the original, how this started too. But so yeah, another way would be as an accessory use for, private property. If it's permitted in the underlying commercial or industrial zone, then I presumably you could set it up in a mobile cart, but you would have to think about how this would apply to maybe another zone, like an industrial zone. Could you do that would be saying you could do an industrial production out of
That was one of the problems in West Lake.
Yeah.
It was a gas station / garage. They shut down the gas station. It was still an automobile garage. So they wanted to use the cupcakes in where it used to be the gas station pull-throughs, not approvable in the same zone.
Yeah.
Kind of problem.
Yeah. So someone wants to tan leather, and commercial or even an industrial, in a cart. Those are the kind of questions that are going through our minds, and we want you guys to
Or do
consider too.
photography in a little
Yeah.
portable
Well,
studio.
well, you talked about somebody could manufacture these single wide trailers, move them out into our industrial park, set them up out because, oftentimes they haven't fully utilized their acreage, but they may have a large manufacturing facility and somebody approaches them that wants to set up some other manufacturing process, but they want to do it out of this mobile trailer. I'm not 100% sure. Those are the difficulties we have as zoning administrators. They're nightmares to us because they're so gray and nothing really tells us exactly what we're supposed to do. And generally we say, red flag, red flag. I'm not sure that we can allow this. And a lot of the reactions are somewhat like yours, that it devalues the appearance of the entire industrial park from what they're trying to achieve, especially if it's not just something that's going to facilitate that existing business in a short-term period of time, but it's somebody that potentially is taking advantage, and the business there is going to, that owns the property, is going to get some additional revenue by allowing them to use their unused property for a while at the detriment to maybe the rest of the industrial park if they pop up all over without adequate standards. And so then writing the standards are the difficulties that we're presented with here, is that, other than you don't want it falling apart or rusting or torn canopies, I'm not sure how you put a design on the diversity of carts and things that you're going to see people come, or trucks.
Well, just go take a cruise through downtown Portland, down on 2nd, up on 11th. Those are the two that come readily to mind for me, and you will see exactly the situation, the scenario you've just presented just now. There is no rhyme, no reason. There is no. I suppose it's, on the positive side, maybe eclectic is the right word, but
Right.
I'm not even sure that that's correct. But
So, staff actually felt that they'd be most appropriate in the pods. But as Commissioner Hensley indicated, I don't think we have a market out here in Canby to set up groupings of 5 or 6 or however many of these, and whose property are we going to put them on? I don't think the city's going to do that on a piece of property. And so it's, there is that philosophical question, is there really a demand out there that we're responding to? Well, we've had 2 requests in 4 years. They just came recently. The production unit, which doesn't seem to fit food cart ordinance, and then the coffee shop at the church that wants to do something more than just 90 days out of the year.
Any of the commissioners want to point out some particular comments or particular items, or let's open it up for any public comment, if nobody does have any? The 3 of you?
I personally think that this is a good thing to have some kind of a standard. At least we're starting somewhere by having some of this regulation. So when things do come up, we have something that we can kind of fall back on. And you can always make modifications to it, in ways. And one of the things that I'm really against is to doing any kind of thing in residential areas. I think that any kind of selling of anything or doing that, you say home businesses, but something that's inside or something that's going to create an odor outside, even though people might like it, you're going to find somebody who doesn't like it and is going to create a problem. So I don't really think there should be anything like this in a residential area. I think it should be in a city or in a city area or an industrial area or something like that, but nothing in a residential area.
Anybody else? Okay, is there anyone want to make public comment? You can have up to 3 minutes. Go ahead, sir. I'm sure you're in the notes from last time, but if you can give us your name and address again.
David Van Tassel, 1586 Northeast 19th Loop, Canby, Oregon. I'm not the speaker that my wife was that was here last time. As far as that bikini barista thing, I wish they would get busted because that would be a perfect place because it's right outside city limits and Clackamas County actually allows it. It is just a trailer. With the market crash and everything, our house kind of went down, so I don't have the capital to get the loan that these other places got. I've been trying to get my salsa going for 8 years now. I have everybody telling me it's the best thing they've ever had, and there's nothing I can do. And then when that place opened up in Aurora, they said they could build it and we could park it there. Well, they're not the best people, and Aurora doesn't want them anymore, so I got my car sitting in my driveway and no place to put it. I have talked with Brooks Cutsworth. There's a little spot in their back. I'd love to park it there. It's out of the way. All I want to do is produce my salsa. Once this is over and you guys could taste it, that I guarantee you'll say the same thing. As I said, all I want to do is produce it, because I guarantee once we do produce it, we will end up being in a stick mill. Our corporate office will be here. I think it'll go big.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this topic?
My name is Renata Mengelberg, and I'm the Economic Development Director. So I'd like to make a couple of comments from that perspective, just to add to the mix. One is that we see food carts as a great entrepreneurship strategy. As you heard from this gentleman, it's a way for people to dip their toe in the water, establish market demand for their products. And as research shows, in Portland, a number of the food carts do eventually grow up and move into existing spaces downtown. And so it adds a new products, new services to the marketplace. It demonstrates demand. It meets a niche or it goes out of business with relatively low overhead. So it also generates activity in our downtown, and from a Main Street perspective, and Jamie can talk to that as well, you want things that are bringing people downtown, that's getting them to move around, whether it's, a great bouquet of flowers or the fantastic cookies or the cupcakes or whatever.